Bill Mattis with the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission. I'm the Great Lakes section leader for the commission, and I work primarily on Lake Superior, mainly in the 1842 treaty ceded waters. The Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission does have 11 member tribes. The tribes each have their own natural resource departments. We have a delegated authority to assist with the off-reservation harvest management with northern Wisconsin waters. And we also assist with population assessments of fish and wildlife plants in the areas that are ceded to the tribes around northern Wisconsin and into Michigan, Upper Peninsula, and northern Minnesota. For Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, it was members of the Red Cliff tribe who sat at the original tech committee meetings, but those members didn't have the scientific capacity. They didn't have scientists on board. That's what the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission was formed to do, was get a collection of scientists that could work for all of the tribes. And because the capacity wasn't there for each tribe to have a scientist, and after a couple of years, we were invited to sign the Joint Strategic Plan. This past year, for the first time, an individual tribe signed that plan, the Red Cliff tribe. What moved us toward more collaboration is working through the auspices of the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, because we do sit on the same technical committees and the same lake committees, and we're able to talk to one another and have that face-to-face communication. I think just that development of relationships over time has been what's worked. Also, I think with Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, we came into being kind of in 1985, 1986, and so just that relationship over time, that seeing that yes, this is an agency that is here and doing good work and doing scientifically sound work, has helped us build that relationship also in the respect. Also, what works really well with the Great Lakes Fishery Commission is that everything we do is non-binding. So the sovereignty of the individual tribes is always respected. The sovereignty of the states is also respected in that sense, that when you come to the table and you discuss a process for moving forward, you're not bound legally to follow that process. It's more of a seeing eye to eye. As a non-tribal member, I have to work at considering whether or not I'm bringing the tribal perspective correctly to the table. And the way I do that is I try to listen to the elders, especially within the community. One way I have tried to move the Indigenous perspective forward is by bringing members of the community or more representation from the communities to the table. First started, and I talked to the commercial fishermen. They remembered the days when the lake trout population crashed. And I had one fisherman who's now in his late 70s. He once told me that he had never seen as many lake trout in the lake as he did more recently in contemporary times, because when he was young, the lamprey were already in the system. You go to a tribe and you ask to have lampricide put into the river, and you get resistance for that. Well, why is that? Well, you can take that back to the tribes not being involved with the decision making way back to the 1950s when the Great Lakes Fishery Commission was first formed. I mean, for too long, the Indigenous perspective has just not been not been taken into account. And and Western science has its strengths, but it has its weaknesses too, right? And I think the more perspectives you can bring in, the better off you are. And as scientists, the more scientists you bring to the table, the better off you are. if you take any set of data and you look at it, you inject your own perspective into that set of data. And the more perspectives you have, the better you're going to come out in the end. So, from my perspective, how Western science views sea lamprey and how Indigenous peoples view sea lamprey are very different. Western science is a command and control. We see an issue. Sea lamprey numbers are high. We're going to suppress them. We see lake trout numbers are too low. We're going to stock them. A lot of times from the Western side, we want to put a value on something, and it's only if something's valuable to us that it has any significance, and that's not true. From the Indigenous perspective, everything has intrinsic value. All the beings have intrinsic value. Sea lamprey at the time I started were actually at a low level in Lake Superior. My original ideas were, is there room for less treatments? And looking at the research that's been done over the years and the history, you find that it's not a being that can be let go. It really causes an imbalance in the system if it's let to go its own way. And that is why we need a control mechanism. That's when there was a real push to look at supplemental controls. In the last 3 years here at GLIFWC, we've partnered with the Bad River Natural Resources Department to look at downstream trapping of the lamprey as they're moving out of the system to see if that is a way that we could suppress the population. But the primary control is still barriers to the sea lamprey moving up to prime spawning areas and the lampricide treatments. Between the state agency and us, we work cooperatively through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which coordinates the sea lamprey control on the lake. The Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission actually does the assessment on some of the rivers. When it comes to the actual control, that is taken on by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has a working relationship with the individual tribes, where they come into the tribes and speak with the tribal council. They work through the natural resource agencies on each of the reservations. GLIFWC's support of the sea lamprey control program is primarily because of the damage that would be inflicted if they were not controlled. The tribes are reliant upon the fishes of Lake Superior, so the lake trout and the whitefish, for both subsistence and for commercial purposes. So they're very important, and they feed the community also. And in the absence of sea lamprey control, those fisheries would be severely suppressed, if not gone. It's necessary. We don't like it. We wish there was a better way. We would rather there not be lampricide put in the waters. What is working in sea lamprey control is that the control agents are willing to reach out and to communicate with the different user groups and with the indigenous tribes around the lake. I think that the Great Lakes Fishery Commission has moved to directly working with the tribes on a government to government basis, and recognizing the sovereignty of the individual tribes, which is a huge move forward from, say, 60 years ago. Key research directions in the field of sea lamprey, I think, are going to be continuing to look at the supplemental controls and how they may play into extending the time between needed lampricide treatments. I would really like to see some research into why there are some streams that have native populations of lampreys, and that the invasive lamprey hasn't taken a foothold. And then also, I think one thing that is being worked on right now and is really exciting is the ability to have a barrier to sea lamprey, but pass the other fish that you would like to pass. definitely is a need for representation from First Nations around the lakes. I mean, it's a decision that lies with the tribes. They're sovereign. The decision lies with the tribes. Provide the information and trust that the tribes will make the correct decision or make, and even, and even if the decision's not correct in your mind, they'll make the correct decision for their tribe.